The race for McLendon-Chisholm City Council places 3 and 5 are both contested, but only the 2 conservative candidates are here in the bunker. Gee, I wonder why. Rockwall County conservatives, are you ready for some straight talk? I'm Bunker Bob Steinhagen, and this is a special edition of The Bunker Bob Show. Welcome to this special edition of the Bunker Bob Show, and I know that you will be glad you took the time to hear what the candidates running for McLendon-Chisholm City Council have to say. I want to give each candidate the opportunity to put their best foot forward, which is why, as I have always done, the candidates received a copy of the questions before they had to decide to participate. Through the magic of video, we create the illusion that both candidates are in studio at the same time. However, each candidate sat down with me for a one-on-one interview, which is edited together to create the illusion that they are here at the same time. This is why I will ask follow-up questions of one candidate, but not the other, and why the candidates do not respond to one another's answers. Now, I have never placed time limits on candidates' answers. However, when they go long, and sometimes they do, we will edit this for time. Since most of the candidates are not used to being on camera, as they're not professional politicians, in fact, the office for which they are running are actually unpaid positions. Before we begin, I let every candidate know that they can re-answer or restate anything they say because the purpose of today's show is to allow them to be the best that they can be. Now, there are 4 candidates for City Council on the ballot for McLendon-Chisholm City Council, 2 in place 3 and 2 in place 5. But as is often the case, the bunker is not a place that a liberal would want to come to answer questions, which is why I have the 2 conservative candidates here today. And I'd like to start by introducing the candidate running for place 3, and that is Paul Day. Paul and his wife, Bree. Is it Bree?
Bree.
Okay, I said it right. Are raising 5 kids here in McLendon-Chisholm. Paul is an award-winning professor of geology, and he has taught at multiple colleges and universities across the country. Paul grew up in the Inland Empire of Southern California, the son of a swimming pool contractor who instilled in Paul the value that through hard work and honesty, one can achieve the American dream. Prior to living in Texas, he lived in Hawaii. Paul is a graduate of UCLA and California State University, Long Beach, loves the outdoors, Cajun cooking, playing the trumpet, and spending time with his kids. Currently, Paul Day serves as vice chair of the McLendon-Chisholm Economic Development Committee, where he has fought for financial stability for the city without compromising the unique rural character of McLendon-Chisholm. Paul's platform centers around open spaces, low taxes, family values, water security, and non-intrusive yet accountable local government. So, Paul, it is great to have you on the show today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. I think this is a great opportunity.
Well, so you have 5 kids. I'm just wondering, what are the ages of those?
So my youngest one just turned 4. I've got a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old about to turn 8, and then I have a stepdaughter who's 16 and a stepson who's 20.
My goodness. Okay, so a busy household for sure.
Super busy with the whole spectrum of family activity going on.
So you're a geologist.
Yes.
Okay, so how did you get involved in that?
I think it was just bred into me. I was one of those guys that used to watch PBS documentaries, and I just loved rocks, and I loved energy resources, and I fell in love with it. I wound up doing my master's degree, doing over a month of research in Mongolia. So I'm well traveled. I've done a lot of international work, and it's one of those things where I just can't get enough of the earth. And one of the things that always gets my attention about the United States is when you come back, I can't wait to get back every single time. I love it here, and I love my neighbors, I love my colleagues, and I love our mountains and our valleys, and I'm just glad to be a part of it.
The mountains. You're not talking about McLendon-Chisholm.
No, not here. The Blackland Prairie out here is still. It's in fact, we're coming right on that time in spring where you can go out there, and the Blackland Prairie will have 13 flowering flowers at the same time.
Yeah.
nowhere else in the world have I ever seen that. This has its own gems if you know when to go out in the morning.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay, and let me introduce Val Bodart. She was born in Oklahoma, but lived in Texas and Wyoming before moving back to Oklahoma. She's been married to Kurt for almost 36 years, and so that was last May, right? May
35.
35 years. Wow. So did y'all do anything special for that?
I don't think so. I think we went to dinner.
35 years. Okay, got it. I know what to expect. All right. You have two children, Samantha and Nick, your daughter-in-law and a daughter-in-law, Amanda, and granddaughter, Kayla. Have you learned how to spoil yet?
Absolutely. I'm expert.
How old is your granddaughter?
She's 3.
3. Oh, gosh. What a great age.
It
Am I
is.
right?
It's
Especially
so fun.
girls.
So fun.
Oh my goodness, that's so great. You are an Air Force veteran, and you enlisted soon after marriage. Your husband also served, correct?
Yes, he did.
Is that where y'all met?
No, I was in college when I met him, and he was in the Air Force, and we got married. And a couple years after that, I joined the Air Force.
Nice.
So we got to serve together, and we were deployed together.
Oh wow! Oh, that's fantastic. Well. You've traveled to several places on temporary duty, and you were deployed to Desert Storm.
Yes.
How long were you deployed?
I was lucky. I only had to be there for 3 months. We went to Saudi Arabia right when Desert Shield started.
I see.
And then I was able to come back home and work from here, work from the base here while my husband stayed there. He stayed the entire time.
Wow.
Through April.
Very good. You've had a variety of jobs, storage management, HR positions, and corporate settings, but your greatest job right now, I guess, is grandmother.
Oh, yeah. It's the best one.
Oh, that's so great. So why did you choose to make a home in the city of McLendon-Chisholm, and how long have you lived here?
We originally, when we moved to Texas, we moved to Royce City.
Okay.
And I've always kind of kept my eye on McLendon-Chisholm. I liked how it was not really a city. It was very country, very homey, where we could buy a little bit of property and have our own. And we took that opportunity and bought here.
And you've been here how long now?
Oh, goodness, since 2014,
Okay.
2015, yeah.
All right, so a little over 6 years then, huh? Thank you, Val. Paul, how about you? Why did you choose to make McLendon-Chisholm your home?
Oh, so we moved here to McLendon-Chisholm 3 years ago. We were in Rockwall about 6 years ago from Hawaii. And the reason why we came out here was we were looking for a place that was close to our own heart, a place that we fit in. And we didn't find that. I was raised in Southern California when it was a very conservative state. It's not that way anymore. It's changed considerably. Most of my family is now leaving that state for other places, whether it be Nevada or Oregon, and of course here to Texas. We came out here because we saw ourselves in a lot of ways as political and economic refugees long before the situation that is currently playing out in politics is happening. So I think we were early respondents to that.
Wonderful. Well, why are you running for city council of all things?
I've always had an interest in local politics, but I think the main reason why I decided to run was because I was largely drafted by my neighbors. I had a heart for it because I cared and they knew that I was passionate about it, but I had a little skepticism about getting in after only being here for 3 years. But one thing is for darn sure, I love the city. And when I decided that I'm never leaving, I'm probably going to be buried in one of these graveyards.
All right, Paul. Val, what about you? Why are you running for city council?
I want to help guide our future, to maintain our rural atmosphere, to maintain our open skies, to be able to see the stars at night. We all bought these homes for a reason. We could have bought anywhere else and lived in higher density neighborhoods, but we bought where we did. And I don't think most of us want that to change.
Well, we say that, but of course, the people have been electing people who have no regard whatsoever for our big lot size. They want smaller lot size, as is evident of the last city council meeting when both Trudy Woessner and Lorna Kippett, they don't care about our 1.5 acre minimum home site.
No.
And they voted to approve another high density development, even though, and their argument is, well, no one came out to oppose it. And so even though there's an ordinance in place that says 1.5 acres per home site. Their idea is, well, laws are only valid if people come out to a city council meeting and oppose it. Yeah. Otherwise, there's no such thing as laws. Now, you don't agree with that?
No, and they think they're right. They think that it only applies if they see people face to face. Well, that's not the way it works.
Right, and even when they do have people face to face, how many times have we stood up and opposed things they're doing, and they don't even acknowledge what we say?
No, and they even came and argued to me one night.
Oh, really?
They did. They came up to me during a break and tried to explain to me that the people want more businesses. They want a Trader Joe's. They want a nail salon, which is exactly the opposite of everything I have heard.
Right.
In the past year of campaigning and meeting people. So I was just in disbelief that they would think that that's true. Mm-hmm. But they do.
And they've never done a survey.
No, they refuse to do a survey.
Right. When I was on city council, when I was mayor, we did surveys and surveyed the people. And those surveys cannot be found on the city's website. If you're elected to city council, will you insist that those surveys come back to the website so that it's part of public record?
Not do more, because it's been a few years.
Yes.
I mean, they're going to do one now for the comprehensive plan.
But they're not including the question about what size lots do people want. They are not asking that question. They refuse to.
Very convenient for them, isn't it?
Very convenient. Yes. So you're gonna stand for the larger lots.
Yes. And I've spoken in city council.
Yes.
About that. In favor of it and against all of the development that they want to bring in.
Yes.
And tried to reason with them, and they don't want to listen. They just sit there.
Though the race for city council is technically a nonpartisan one, which political party best reflects your values and why? I know the answer to this one, Val.
I'm Republican. Mainly, I'm very conservative.
Not only that, but you were also a state delegate to
Yes.
the Republican state delegate.
Yes.
You attended the county Republican county convention.
Yes.
You attended the precinct convention.
Yes.
Your opponent did not.
No.
Thanks, Val. Paul, how would you answer this? Which political party?
So, if I was to make a kind of generic statement, it would be the Republicans. And I have been a Republican since I was 18 years old. I would say philosophically, I have very deep Jeffersonian roots. A lot of people will say, who is your political hero? And I'll bring up people like Grover Cleveland, and they'll say, who is that, Grover Cleveland? But I like people that actually believe that the power belongs to the people and all power should be exercised as locally as possible. And that was what got me interested in local politics here. One of the first things I came into, I was actually watching your show one time. I just moved in, and I had Googled McLendon-Chisholm, and the Bunker Bob show came up, and so I watched that episode, and I actually saw a wonderful interview between you, and I can't remember who it was, but you were speaking about an issue regarding a land speculator that was looking for money to be able to install a water line. So, that was the first time I realized that my rural, low-tax area that I just moved into was probably going to be short-lived unless somebody got involved, because I wanted to raise my family here.
Well, excellent. What do you see as the city council's primary role and responsibility?
The primary role of the city council should be to oversee the public purse and to oversee the public safety aspects of the city. Beyond that, it should not be involved too heavily in trying to guide business, guide economic development, as they like to call it. Markets do a very good job of doing that. And as long as we do it in an honest way that doesn't disenfranchise the residents of the city, for example, by rezoning acreages and things like this, I mean, the market says it's 1.5 acre, for example, and then the city council changes that to benefit
Well, they don't even
business.
change it.
Yeah.
They didn't even change it to allow Sonoma Verde. They just
did it.
Yeah, they just did it. Yeah.
And frequently they do so because they are designing the city around the public purse rather than the public purse around the city. So this is something that I've taken a deep interest in, especially on the Economic Development Committee work that we've been doing. And it's a great committee with many different ideas. And I appreciate every single one of my colleagues that was on that committee and the input that they've given me. And they've all been very good friends to me. But with that said, we don't always understand, or I shouldn't say we don't understand, we don't always see eye to eye on how that should come together. So one of the things that we've been very good at is taking it down to what is it we want ultimately. And that is the driving fundamental question that I think is in McLendon-Chisholm's, I guess you'd say, in the conversation right now. Yeah.
Very good. Val, same question. Role and responsibility of the council.
To do what the people want, not just what they think, what the city council thinks they want. We represent the people. If you elect me, that's what I do. I represent you.
Not the developers.
Not the developers. No. It's about controlled growth, logical growth, not increasing our property taxes just because. Royce City's going through that.
Yeah.
They've had a lot of growth in the past few years since we moved away from Royce City. And what's on the ballot? Raising their property taxes. So this idea that bringing in more businesses is going to keep our property taxes low is a huge lie.
Right.
And not true. And I've stated that in city council meetings. It goes unheard.
My other question, so along the same lines, most of the decisions that have been made by McLendon-Chisholm City Council under Mayor Short are behind closed doors. Very little discussion, if any, occurs out in front of the public. I was criticized when I was mayor for having long meetings. If you remember the mailing that went out, no more long meetings. So they've been true to their words. They're not doing long meetings. They're just keeping all of they're meeting behind closed doors. They're meeting outside of city council meetings in violation of Texas Open Meetings Act. This is the fundamental question. We've got Brian Davis, who is who is the only conservative on the city council now, who was just elected. He beat Dan Tucker, the same guy who's trying to run, who's running against you now. And so we have one conservative on the council right now who is trying to fight for transparency, but he doesn't have the votes to require it.
And he's new.
Yes.
He's totally new to this.
Yes.
So he's wading through it as best he can.
Yep.
They do so little deliberating in public, and when they do, it's not really deliberating. It's very sad.
What is your vision for the city?
I want it to be a desirable area to live in. And that's really it. I don't see it needing to be a metropolis. We come here for the peace, the quiet, and to get away from the city, because most of us do work in the city.
Yeah. How about you, Paul? What's your vision?
I want it to stay low tax, rural. My wife uses the word pro-family. I like to say family-friendly. Both work really well. I would like to see open spaces preserved. I want the skies to stay dark at night. One of the things that I like to point out to my colleagues, if they happen to be at a city council meeting, they usually get out after dark, is Sonoma Verde is almost like a big beacon of light that you can see shooting up into space, and people there have difficulty seeing the Texas skyline or the Texas stars. And this is something that I want to make sure is preserved for a long time. And, over the long term, this entire region is going to get developed. I mean, they're going to put in an entire traffic corridor that's going to go all the way up to the Princeton area and into the McKinney area. This is going to, and we don't have control over that. So, as I'd like to describe, I foresee McLendon-Chisholm seeking to be an oasis surrounded by this, because we can't control what Terrell's going to do or Rockwall's going to do. We can only control our own backyard. And I think by being merely an oasis, that will give us many of the semblances we have been looking for, again, low taxes, open spaces, the black skies that we could see the stars in for a very long time.
You seem to be saying that you support the 1.5 acre minimum per home site standard, that ordinance that's in place, that has been in place for some time, even though city councils of the past have just ignored it and approved development. So if a development were to come in and they wanted to put in a neighborhood that was less than 1.5 acre per home site, would you support that or oppose it?
I would oppose it. Okay. Anything smaller than 1.5 acres, given what we now know, the question is what is the public willing to give up to get that 1 acre lot or that's 0.75 acre lot? At 1.5 acres, we've still been able to maintain our habitats for owls, cardinals, all of coyotes, bobcat. Yep. When we go below that, you'll start seeing them disappear, and that will be replaced with what they call weed species. You'll start seeing rats. You'll start seeing roaches. You'll start seeing blackbirds. The cardinals will be gone. The hawk will be driven out, and basically you'll see a complete reversal of the ecosystem. And so you're no longer going to have that rural feel anymore. You're going to have what I call the Waco effect or the Garland effect. And Garland used to be just like this area at one point too.
Yeah.
And they developed it and they wound up compromising on their values. Now they're high tax, small lot, and they have all the problems and they're no longer rural.
You know, one of the things I find interesting is the influence that those in the unincorporated area of our city who receive their fire protection for free. We pay for their fire protection, and where half of all fire calls go outside of our city to those who contribute nothing. They have had a profound influence on our elections by donating to people like Trudy Woessner, your opponent, and of course keeping Mayor Short, because these are the people who want to see smaller lots. These are the people that want to see more growth. And so, how do you plan to campaign so that people understand, the people who are in McLendon-Chisholm, the voters, the people who actually get a chance to vote? How are you going to combat that, all of the influence that's coming from outside of our city?
It's going to be a challenge for sure, because the city council's been losing that battle, right? And you brought up a couple of names that seem to have decided that 1 acre lots and smaller are acceptable. I'm going to be on the other side of that. It's going to be something where I'm going to be asking people straight out, what are you willing to give up? What is it going to? Are you willing to give up the hawks? Are you willing to give up the owls? Are you willing to give up the rural lifestyle? And some people will say, perhaps that the rural, your definition of rural is arbitrary, but it's not to the environment. And I don't mean this in like a, environmentalist way. I mean this as a conservative Texan. What does it mean to live in a rural environment in Texas? That means that you go out and you see hawks out on the rail. And if they're not on the rail, what happened to them? What do we do to get them out of here? What about the noise pollution and the issues? People
and light pollution, as you mentioned.
The light pollution and the sound pollution are major issues. There's a great thing about stepping out into your backyard. You can hear the crickets, and that is something that I want to hear, no matter what happens around us for a very long time.
Very good. How often do you attend city council meetings, and what have you learned from that experience?
I actually physically attend probably every third one, but I watch every single one of them that is broadcast. So usually within a week I'm brought up to date. I certainly review the minutes. I'm very careful about what I see in the minutes, and I try to read, especially the executive sessions, I pay close attention to. So I'm pretty well informed on what's going on, and I have a large number of very well informed neighbors and colleagues that if they have a question or something that they want to bring up, they talk, and we have very open and frank, sometimes discussions, sometimes they're debates, but in the end, it's all friends, and we wind up having very informative approaches to things. I've discovered that we're 95% in league with each other on things. Most people, when you ask them, even the people in Sonoma Verde, do you support open spaces? They say, yeah, even if they don't live on an open space lot.
Okay.
They still benefit from their community having them.
No question.
And they recognize that. And so I think that that's a winning proposition, is the open space argument overall.
You mentioned executive session, and my biggest criticism of the city council is that most of the decisions are deliberated and discussed and decided behind closed doors more than any other time. When I was mayor, obviously, I was criticized for having long, open meetings where people could see what we were doing. It was recorded. Now we have very short meetings, very long executive sessions. If you're on city council, how will you protect open discussion and deliberation? Will you demand that meetings stop being held behind closed doors and start being put out in the open?
Yeah, I will demand full compliance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, and I have discovered this, and it's not just here. Many municipalities unknowingly violate the Texas Open Meetings Act. But for example, the ability of the public to render opinions at times of motions is state law. We don't practice that law.
No, we don't.
But we need to do so, because at that point, if we were to carry out something, for example, it was just this vote, we were just this last week where the city council voted to allow the 1 acre lots, but they didn't allow public discussion. In fact, one person asked, when will I have the chance? And he said, it'll be disallowed. And in fact, another city councilman, I believe it's council member Davis.
Brian Davis. Yes,
Brian,
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Brian
Councilman Davis. Yeah.
Okay, yes.
He had actually indicated to somebody in the audience, he said, you can see him, he says, he won't let you speak, but even though somebody had their hand up. So Texas State Code 551.007 makes it very clear that you can speak both at the beginning and at the time of motion. Executive session laws are routinely violated. They're not an opportunity to have secret meetings.
Right.
granted, if this happens and somebody says, okay, we're going to have a secret meeting, I'm going to say, then I'm not going to be attending. The meetings where they want to confer with the attorney is to talk about the law in Texas only.
Correct.
It is not to sit there and to make the decision with your attorney present or to some other grand excuse. It has to be for the purposes of establishing some type of legal dialogue with the attorney. And that's it.
So you plan to bring transparency back to the city council?
Absolutely. I mean, the Texas Open Meetings Act already requires it.
Correct.
But we should not be discussing the merits of motions behind closed doors. That must be done in public. That's the law. And the Texas Supreme Court has upheld that.
Val, I already know the answer to this, but how often do you attend city council meetings?
I've been attending for the last 2 years.
You've attended more city council meetings than Mayor Short has.
Probably.
No, it's absolutely,
Okay.
it's an empirical, irrefutable, incontrovertible fact.
Okay.
So let's start there.
And I stay.
And probably Dan Tucker has too. I mean, the Mayor Short he's absent a lot.
Yes.
There's a lot of spending going on. They hired a code enforcement officer,
Yes.
as opposed to allowing the fire department to do it, who spends, they average one call a day. They're licensed to do it.
Right.
So we've added another member, another staff position
That they want to make full time, maybe.
that they want.
Lorna has
Exactly.
promised to consider it.
That's right. That's right. He's going out and he's writing a lot of tickets, isn't he?
Yes, he's working.
So what can be done? I mean, how do we curb some of this out of control
We
spending?
just need somebody in there that will do it. That will speak up and say, no, we need to do this, and control the city staff. The city staff does not run our city.
No, they do run our city.
Well, they're not supposed to run our city.
But they do.
Well,
Don't you agree?
I
mean,
do.
Yeah.
They have way more influence than I believe they should. They should be taking guidance from the city council and the mayor, not the other way around. They need to do what the people say.
And we've already talked about how often you attend meetings, but what have you learned from that experience?
So much. How dishonest they can be right to our faces. They can listen to everything that any of us get up to say during citizen comments and just disregard all of it or try to use it against us.
Yes.
And it's ridiculous. They are not representing us. They'll allow us to go and speak to them, but they don't listen and they don't take it to heart.
They only allow us to speak because state law requires it.
Right. Yes. And don't you dare ask a question or do a point of
information, point of order. Correct.
Anything,
Yes.
because they don't know Robert's Rules of Order or try to.
Well, and as Paul Day and I have talked about the fact that it was interesting that Keith Short, after he had me thrown out of a meeting unlawfully, violating my rights, throwing me out of a meeting. The very next meeting in that meeting, by the way, I asked, are we under Robert's Rules of Order?
Uh-huh.
Well, if we're under Robert's Rules of Order, I have point of information. I have a point of parliamentary inquiry. He wouldn't do it. So the next meeting he put on the agenda to get rid of Robert's Rules of Order, because as I think that we think that Keith thought that Robert's Rules of Order was actually Robert Steinhagen's Rules of Order. He created his own Rules of Order, Keith's Rules of Order, which literally said you couldn't. He restricted the free speech. He said you couldn't hold a placard, which is speech, because he hates the First Amendment. Even though he served his country honorably, as you did, he hates the Constitution of the United States. What he once was serving to protect, now he basically tramples on. That is the thing that those in my audience care about most, is our Constitution, and we want to look for people who are going to uphold the Constitution. Val, are you one of those people?
Absolutely. Bring as many signs to city council as you want to. I don't care.
Very good. What do you see as the biggest challenge or challenges facing the city of McLendon-Chisholm?
Keeping it conservative.
You mean going back to conservatism? Because it's not conservative right now.
No, but there are far more conservatives living here than are in our city government.
I would agree.
And so we need to flip that around.
Amen. That's right. Paul, what about you? Biggest challenge?
Maintaining the low tax rural nature of this community. I mean, it has to be, it's something that people when you hear the city manager use phrases like, "Well, this is standard practice."
Right, right.
Well, I moved here because the city wasn't using standard practices
Exactly.
at other locations. I don't want to be Blinn or Garland or Waco. I would like to be McLendon-Chisholm, and it's that diversity of it's that difference that produces the diversity of neighborhoods that we have here. And so there's nothing standard about us. And so we need to stop using standard principles. Otherwise, we might as well just pave the entire Blackland Prairie, get rid of all the flowers, say goodbye to all the bobcat, and just say we're going to be a bedroom community with strip malls going right down the main drag.
Yeah. Good. For the first time in Texas history, state and local government mandated involuntary shutdowns of private businesses and houses of worship in an effort to stop the spread of the COVID pandemic. Whether or not you supported this action by government, voters have the right to know under what circumstances you support a municipal government shutting down local businesses and or houses of worship.
That's a very hard question. Were you talking about in the context of only a pandemic or any context?
I'm talking about any context.
The only time that I could ever see that happening is in the event of an insurrection.
Okay.
That would be the
What do
only
you
time
mean?
I could think
Give me an example.
of an insurrection.
Yeah. What do you mean insurrection in a municipal from a municipal point of view?
Oh, I see what you're saying. From a municipal point of view. From a municipal point of view.
This is when a
yeah. I thought you were talking about generically.
No,
speaking.
I'm talking about a city government. You're going to be sitting behind the dais of a city government. When is it okay for that city to say we're shutting down businesses?
It's not.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not acceptable.
All right. As
the First Amendment is unequivocal on this.
I love that. I agree. I'm glad to hear you say that. What about you, Val?
Under no circumstances. We're in a free country. You cannot get around that part. We are in a free country. Wear a mask if you want to. If you don't want to, don't. We cannot tell each other what to do. We each have our own liberty. That's God-given. It's not government-given.
I love that, and that's the shortest answer given to me, and the most, in my opinion, prolific of all. So thank you for that. As the population grows, citizens clamor for more government services while also fighting against higher taxes. What experience and solution do you bring to the table that might help accomplish both?
We don't need a lot of government. Mainly.
What do you mean by that? I mean, that is anathema to a lot of the people who support our current mayor and city council.
Basically, the founding fathers wanted us to govern ourselves. And it was set up to where it's national government, the federal government, down to states. States are supposed to govern themselves. Down to counties and cities. We're supposed to govern ourselves. Down to the individual. We're supposed to govern ourselves.
So personal responsibility.
Wow, what a concept, isn't it?
Yeah, you're one of those haters, I guess.
I am.
Yes. those liberty-loving conservatives. Man, God bless you, Val Bodart. Paul, what do you think?
Well, first off, you don't over-ask. If people are out there asking for services that they're not entitled to, we need to tell them no. We have to be willing to say no, even to our own constituents. We want more fire, we want whatever. And you say, but at what cost?
Yeah.
And if the cost does not match what you're willing to pay for those services, then the answer is no. And honestly, imagine a business coming in that's already been incentivized to come in with $250,000 of taxpayer dollars.
Yes.
They're now getting police and fire services, which are being now paid for by those residences. So they're being double subsidized. In most situations, this is not a win for the local residents. Private business should get private security.
Very good, very good. Under what circumstances would you support an increase to the city's tax rate?
I don't foresee any reason to increase taxes at this point. I mean, the appraisal district is already raising taxes artificially.
Yes.
And I'm one of the people that are complaining about this. I know because they want to tax me an extremely high amount, almost like they found platinum underneath my house. And And it's kind of crazy. And then so I said, well, fine, then I'm going to go and get my mortgage insurance taken off my mortgage. And I went to get an appraisal done. And then the appraiser came off with a huge difference. I don't want to say the amount. And I wasn't able to get the mortgage. So now I got the high tax and the mortgage insurance at the same time.
Wow.
So there's clearly a disconnect between what the government, who has a self-interest in what the outcome of your appraisal is going to be, and what the market is willing to report your value as. This is a major problem. And I don't see any reason why we would do so. If only if the government is willing to grow faster than the population, and in particular its budget, then at that point you have to ask yourself, why is it doing this? Is it taking on a self-interested approach to this problem, or is it working for the people?
All right, Paul, how would you answer this, Val?
I really can't imagine it at this point, because at this point in my life, my husband is starting to think about retirement.
Yeah.
And it raises some concerns in me, because without that income and without a good retirement setup, then we won't be able to afford our home. And I don't want that for me. I don't want that for any of my neighbors in McLendon-Chisholm as we all age. We can't all work forever.
Right.
And if they tax us out of our homes, that's anti-American too.
I agree. You know, when I came on city council, the first thing I did was propose and got passed the senior tax cap. So that makes it impossible for the tax rate to increase, but property tax values can still go up, and so someone's tax rate may still be the same, but they're still paying more in taxes. Are you willing to work for the taxpayer, and when the effective tax rate is lower on the tax rate, that where you would have to actually lower the tax rate to ensure that citizens' taxes did not increase? Would you be willing to be an advocate for them?
Very strongly. Very strongly.
Very good. Very good. Do you foresee a tax rate increase coming in the next 4 years for McLendon-Chisholm?
If I'm not elected, yes.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. Yes, I definitely would. Paul, you see a tax rate increase coming?
I wouldn't vote for one. Okay. I don't see any need for one. I mean, they just said, hey, we just added all these houses on 1 acre lots. We could tax them now, right? So in theory, they're getting all the, that's the argument that's being made.
Right,
I think it's not the argument I would make. I would say that. I would disagree with that argument. But I foresee no reason to do this. I mean, if they have enough money to give $250,000 to a land speculator, then they've got too much money in the bank.
Well, I agree with that. Are there items in this year's city budget that you see as out of proportion, unnecessary, or out of control?
I don't know that there's enough oversight of the processes that are happening. So, it's an interesting question, because you're asking for something specific. To me, it's like opening the garage and finding 7 or 8 rats and saying which rat is the most offensive.
Yeah.
Right, they're all offensive.
Yeah.
There's just not enough oversight of the public purse in general. Case in point, we just had the city council meeting recently, or this last week, where they voted almost $43,000 for an audiovisual system.
Yeah. Yes.
And and I was looking at it and I said, well, where's the competitive bids?
Yeah.
As far as I could tell, there were none submitted.
They don't do that.
And I know that I'm sure that they were good business people that showed up. They made their presentation. They walked out, and then they were out. You could see they were out there patting each other on the back and whatever. They're counting their money out in the parking lot.
Oh yeah.
And I just said, why in the world would they ever get at least 2 more bids?
Yeah.
2 more bids.
Yeah.
So it's $43,000. I mean, they're gonna get a pretty Mercedes system installed.
Oh yeah.
That they probably don't need.
No, they don't need it, and don't even get me started there. Okay, Val, the one thing in business, in private business, for those of us who own businesses, the one control, the one cost that you have the most control over is salaries.
Yes.
And so in government, because you have a mayor that has never had a private sector job, he's never signed the front of a check, he doesn't understand that every salary position that you bring on and add medical and things like that, that's a burden to the city. It's not an addition to it. So would you be willing to look at some of the bureaucrats that we have added onto the budget and be willing to say, you know what, this is not the time that we need to be adding a code enforcement officer or any other staff positions that are just superfluous to a city like ours.
Well, and it's done to grow our big government.
Right.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's not that they're going to work harder or bring more to the table. It's that the powers that be want the bigger government and want the look of it.
Yes.
To make them look good, I guess.
Yep.
But that's not what we need. We're not there. We're still kind of small town and want to stay that way.
Well, we'll see on this election, I think. I mean, this is a real, this is going to be the watershed moment, I think, for our city, whether or not our city goes big and big government and higher taxes, or if we want to restrain government and start making decisions that are based upon fiscal responsibility and conservatism.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And you and Paul are the latter.
And we will actually show up at the meetings prepared.
Well, well, okay, but Trudy has other things going on with her life.
I do too.
Yeah, that would be interesting to once again see a city council that is absolutely prepared. That was boy, it's been a long time since we've actually seen that.
Research, it's a concept, Dave.
That's amazing. So is there an issue or set of issues on which you wish to focus if elected?
I think if Paul and I are both elected, or one or the other, I think we will both dig in and try to keep us, or turn us back to being conservative, do all the things that we have just talked about. I think both of us have the same mindset and the same goals, and we love the city the same way.
All right, Val. Paul, how about you? Specific issue or issues that you want to focus on?
The biggest issue I'm interested in is convincing the local voters that they are entitled to good, honest, open government, and that they should show up and expect it. I've realized that a lot of people have a lot of apathy. A lot of my neighbors have apathy, and I know that there was probably some political turmoil, I don't know, in the last 10 years prior to my coming here.
Yes,
for sure. Because when
I
came
can tell
in,
you that's true.
You were, Well, I appreciate your service, by the way. But I know that there's a lot of apathy in the air, and people say, "Oh, well, I'm not going to go," or "I'm not going." Show up.
Yeah.
Tell the mayor, whoever it is, whether it's Mayor Short or whoever the future mayor is going to be, when the time comes, I want to be able to speak. I want to be able to have my opinion heard. I want that baked into the cake. Because the last thing the city needs is the Attorney General coming in and saying, you didn't have a fair and open, honest meeting, and I'm going to void all of those votes, which is what the current law says that they have the ability to do. So, that's what I'm about, is trying to make sure that our rural nature of the city is maintained, low tax, but that we have open, frank, and fair discussions about things, not things that are being done through walking quorums or in any other way.
One of the things that most impressed me about you was when Mayor Short decided to get rid of Robert's Rules of Order and create, literally, Keith's Rules of Order. I don't know if he thought. I kind of have a sinking suspicion that he thought Robert's Rules of Order was Robert Steinhagen's Rules of Order, and he didn't realize that Robert's Rules of Order is an established rule of decorum that is used by virtually every local, state, and obviously the federal government as well, and it was created in the U.S. military. But some of the things that Keith's Rules of Order, he wanted to get rid of Robert's Rules and then enact restrictions on the First Amendment rights of citizens. You, however, stood up before that item was put on the agenda, and you gave a very eloquent discussion about why Robert's Rules of Order was so important to you. You said something that I thought was very interesting. You said you have a couple of books by your bedside, and what are those?
Well, I have the Bible. I keep Tolkien. Right, The Lord of the Rings, which is one of my favorite books, and I have Robert's Rules of Order.
Robert's Rules of Order.
And honestly, it's one of the it's one of the most sublime texts that's ever been produced by human intelligence, because it allows people to organize complicated thoughts across cultures. And the United States is, they use the term melting pot, but we're definitely a diverse culture, no matter where you go. And how do you get people who might have family from Mexico and people with family from China, with people from San Jacinto, Texas, to come to some decision about how their community should be allocating funding on a pipeline or something like this.
Exactly.
And Robert's Rules of Order has been doing that. It's not an easy system.
No.
But it works, and it's one of the reasons why the United States has a more functional governmental system. And I know we get frustrated and there's a lot of friction built into it. But honestly, if you leave the country, I mean, if you go to Morocco, you go to Mongolia, you go to these other places, you go to Europe, you'll find that these things don't flow nearly as easily. Usually it's somebody that's appointed that just makes the decision, and then they usually, 99 times out of 100, they get it wrong. So it's the costs escalate, and that's the reason why things just seem to work more functionally in the United States.
I think what I like most about Robert's Rules of Order is it ensures that the voice of the minority is never quashed, that the voice is always heard, and that's, I think, important. I'm a huge believer, and I've always been a believer in a diverse set of opinions, that's not a bad thing that we may disagree. And you alluded to the fact that those on the Economic Development Committee, you guys don't necessarily all agree on things. But what's important is that there's discussion, there's furtive discussion that happens in making decisions and recommendations. I just had just out of curiosity, being that you are on the Economic Development Committee, what's happening there, and what should citizens expect to come out of that committee as a recommendation for the City Council in the next year?
So I'm rolling my eyes a little bit. There's some action that happened with the City Council. We're still trying to unravel this last week. The city manager went and asked for a pause on the Economic Development Committee. Originally, we were coming together and putting together a report. We were not notified that she was going to put that on the agenda, nor were we notified that she was going to ask for this. And unfortunately, because Section 551.007 is not being obeyed by the City Council, we weren't asked, even though both myself and another member were both present. We could have both been consulted at that time, but because there's no public comments allowed on motions at the city, we weren't called to the podium to testify that we would have opposed this. Our liaison is William Dahl, and as far as I know, he wasn't even notified that this was coming. So we were preparing a large report that would have synthesized the complexion of the city, so that when they bring in these consultants that are going to put together the master plan, they would have used our report as the cornerstone. What effectively has, and I could be wrong, and maybe I'm misreading it, and again, it's just what I know from the meeting, and I haven't been able to follow up this week. That's been turned on its head a little bit. The consultant is going to lay the cornerstone, and then we're going to adopt to it. And I don't think that that's the way we should approach it. So I have an email out, and I need to talk to the chair, Jim Herron. I have not spoken with him yet. He's a very good chair, and I'm sure that he's on top of it. Yeah. Okay. So I'm interested in hearing what he has to say. I want to make sure that I'm not being overly alarmed. But we were doing great work, and we were getting together what our collective values are for the city on that report, and it was going to be a pretty good thing.
Well, Paul, obviously you're a conservative. You're running against a very, very big government liberal who professes to be a Republican, as everyone in McLendon-Chisholm has to do, since it's so heavily Republican. Ultimately, unless you and Val win this race, if only one of you were to win the race, that would leave that person, Brian Davis, on the City Council to be the stopgap and ensure transparency. So this is a very important race, in my opinion, for conservatives who believe in limited government, who believe in transparent government, and who believe in protecting the open spaces and more rural lifestyle that so many people come to McLendon-Chisholm to enjoy. I wanted to give you an opportunity to speak directly to voters and explain to them why you are the best choice for representing the voter, the taxpayer, the homeowners on City Council. And that camera right there is all yours. So, Paul, take it away.
Thank you very much, Robert. The reason why I'm running for City Council is because I want to preserve the rural, low-tax, open areas that we have grown to enjoy. We all moved here, we invested in this community, and we want to make sure that that investment is protected, not only for our children, but for our children's children. I am expecting my children to raise their families in the very same community that we are building today. And I'm hoping that for many years, people will come back and they will remember the hard work that we put into making this happen. I deeply appreciate Robert for bringing me on as one of my predecessors, who I know tried to hold the line for a long time against a lot of this stuff, and I'm hoping to carry on a lot of that forward. Low taxes are a big deal. That's one of our giant financial incentives for being here. It's one of the sources of our prosperity, and without that prosperity, we could expect to start seeing some of the decay that we find in some of our neighboring cities that's starting to set in. And when I say decay, I mean economic decay, which turns into social decay. It's a beautiful place. It's an exquisite area. And quite frankly, I think that this is a place that I'm going to wind up living the rest of my life. So I want it to be the best place it possibly can be, which is why I'm asking for your vote.
Val, your closing remarks. That's your camera right there, and talk to them.
I basically have the same things I said last time when I was here running for mayor. I feel the same way. I decided to run for city council for the very same reasons. My platform is exactly the same. Even though I would be serving in a different capacity, I would appreciate the opportunity to have that capacity to serve you and to be the best city council person that I can, and to hold the line, to keep us conservative, to keep our open spaces, to keep our taxes low, and to guide what city government we do have, to keep it small. And so I would really appreciate your vote, and I will listen to you in every way possible.
You know what I thought about just now is as Val Bodart has been talking, one of the disappointments from last year was that she wasn't successful in her bid for mayor. But the more I think about it, it's not a bad thing, because frankly, the mayor can't vote. And to have someone who is conservative, who will toe the line, able to vote, that's actually a better thing, because there's nothing the mayor can do without the consent of the city council. And to have someone like Val Bodart on the city council, I think would be a boon to our city and help us to hold the line. And don't forget, May 1st is election day. So, and on your screen now, you see all the early voting times. Don't forget to pass this along to your friends. Let them see for themselves why Val Bodart and Paul Day are not just the only ones willing to come into the bunker, but the only ones who are willing to fight for you. So I do hope that we will see you at the polls. So until next time, blessings.